The Silverpine territory had always been unforgiving to those who refused to bend. Raven Blackthorn learned this truth before she could even shift properly. At 23, she carried a reputation that preceded her like storm clouds, too headstrong, too sharp-tongued, too wild for any respectable packwolf to claim. The elders whispered it during moon gatherings. The unmated males avoided her gaze during hunts. Even her own father, Beta Marcus Blackthorn, regarded her with exhausted disappointment. "You'll die alone if you don't learn your place," her mother had said countless times, voice brittle with shame. But Raven couldn't silence the fire that burned in her chest. She challenged unfair decisions. She questioned outdated traditions. She refused to lower her eyes when alphas spoke, refused to make herself smaller to comfort fragile male egos. The pack saw defiance. Raven saw survival. The autumn moon hung heavy over the ceremonial grounds when Alpha Kieran Silverpine announced his judgment. The entire territory had gathered, over 300 wolves standing in hierarchical formation beneath ancient oaks. Raven stood alone in the center, dirt beneath her bare feet, silver moonlight painting her wild dark hair and defiant green eyes. "Raven Blackthorn," Kieran's voice carried across the silent crowd, each word deliberate and cold. "You have disrupted pack harmony for the last time. You challenged my authority during the hunt, endangered our warriors with your recklessness, and showed blatant disrespect to your superiors." Her father wouldn't meet her eyes. Her mother wept quietly into her hands. "The council has decided," Kieran continued, his amber eyes hard as stone. "You are hereby stripped of your pack bonds. You will leave Silverpine territory by dawn. Any wolf who aids you will face the same fate." The crowd's collective gasp felt like claws raking across her skin. Exile, the cruelest punishment short of death. A wolf without a pack was vulnerable to rogues, rival territories, and the slowly creeping madness that came from severed bonds. Raven lifted her chin, refusing to let them see her tremble. "I'd rather run alone than crawl beside cowards." The slap came swift, Kieran's Beta striking her across the face hard enough to split her lip. Blood bloomed copper-bright on her tongue. Still, she didn't lower her gaze. "Insolent bitch," the Beta snarled. "You'll learn respect when you're begging at our borders for scraps." Kieran raised his hand for silence. "Dawn, Raven, not a moment later." They turned their backs on her, the ancient ritual of rejection. One by one, 300 wolves pivoted away, severing their pack consciousness from hers. The emptiness hit like ice water flooding her lungs. The constant hum of pack presence, the comforting awareness of belonging, vanished in one brutal instant. Raven stumbled, catching herself against rough bark. Her wolf howled inside her mind, confused and wounded. But she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She walked through the crowd, head high despite the blood dripping from her chin, despite the hollow ache where her pack bonds used to live. Her small cabin at the territory's edge offered little comfort. She packed what she could carry, clothing, dried meat, a hunting knife her grandfather had given her before he passed. The silver pendant around her neck, marked with a symbol she'd never understood, felt unusually warm against her skin. Sleep wouldn't come. She sat on her porch steps, watching stars wheel overhead, wondering which direction death would come from first. Rogues favored the northern passes. The Blood Moon territory to the east killed trespassers on sight. West led to human lands, dangerous for a wolf alone. South meant the wildlands, unmapped territory, where even the bravest hunters rarely ventured. South, then. If she was going to die, she'd do it on her own terms. Dawn arrived with mist and birdsong. Raven shouldered her pack, took one last look at the only home she'd ever known, and walked into the forest. Behind her, Silverpine territory continued its daily routines, already forgetting the wild girl who'd never learned to submit. The first 3 days passed in exhausted silence. She hunted small game, avoided open spaces, and pushed deeper into unfamiliar territory. Her wolf remained restless, grieving the severed bonds, searching constantly for a pack that no longer existed. At night, Raven dreamed of her mother's tears and her father's shame, waking with her face wet and her chest tight. On the 4th day, she crossed into lands that smelled wrong. The trees grew twisted here, their bark blackened and scarred. Animal tracks disappeared abruptly, as if creatures knew better than to linger. The air tasted of old violence and newer fear. Raven's instincts screamed warnings, but exhaustion had dulled her senses. She didn't notice the rogue until he was already circling her, lips pulled back from yellowed fangs. "Well, well," he rasped, his voice damaged from years without pack speech. "Fresh meat wandering alone. You lost, little wolf." Two more emerged from the undergrowth, a female with matted fur, and a younger male whose eyes held nothing but hunger. Rogues. Wolves who'd lost themselves to madness after too long without bonds. They killed for sport now, incapable of reason or mercy. Raven's hand found her knife. "Stay back." The first rogue laughed, a broken sound like grinding glass. "She's got claws." "I like the feisty ones." They attacked in coordination, the female lunging high while the males circled low. Raven shifted mid-dodge, her wolf form smaller than theirs but faster. She caught the female's throat with her teeth, tasting rancid blood, then twisted away before the males could pin her. But there were three of them, and she was already weak from days of poor sleep and little food. Claws raked her shoulder. Fangs found her hind leg. She yelped, stumbling, and the larger male prepared for a killing strike. The roar that shattered the forest silence made every creature freeze. A massive wolf burst through the tree line, easily twice the size of the rogues. His fur the color of storm clouds, his eyes burning gold with alpha authority that hit like physical force. Power radiated from him in waves that made Raven's knees buckle despite herself. The rogues scattered instantly, whimpering as they fled. Even lost to madness, they recognized a predator beyond their ability to challenge. The giant wolf turned those molten eyes on Raven. She forced herself to stand despite her wounds, refusing to show weakness even as blood matted her fur. Her wolf didn't know whether to submit or fight, confused by the conflicting instincts screaming through her exhausted mind. He shifted to human form, a man in his late 20s with sharp features, shoulder-length dark hair, and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His bare chest showed old battle scars, and his presence carried the unmistakable weight of alpha command. But something was different. Beneath the power, Raven sensed exhaustion, barely controlled desperation, the kind of weariness that came from fighting battles on too many fronts for too long. "Shift," he commanded, voice deep and rough. "Let me see your wounds." Raven's wolf wanted to obey. The alpha pull was instinctive and strong, but years of defiance weren't easily broken. She shifted to human form on her own terms, covering herself with her torn clothing as best she could, meeting his gaze directly. His eyes widened slightly. "You're exiled. I can smell the severed bonds." "Observant," she said, voice dripping sarcasm, despite the pain lancing through her shoulder. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face before his expression hardened. "You're in Stormcrest territory, my territory, and you're bleeding all over it. I'll leave. You'll die if you keep running in this condition." He moved closer, and Raven forced herself not to retreat. "Those rogues will come back with reinforcements once they realize I'm alone. We need to move now. I don't need... This isn't a negotiation." His alpha command rolled through the words, and Raven's wolf whimpered despite her determination to resist. "You can walk beside me to safety, or I can carry you. Choose." Pride warred with practicality. The wounds throbbed with each heartbeat, and her vision was starting to blur at the edges. She'd already proven she could defy her old pack. Dying alone to prove a point to this stranger seemed pointless. "I'll walk," she said through gritted teeth. His lips twitched. "Smart choice. I'm Callan Stormcrest, and you are?" "Leaving as soon as I'm patched up." "That wasn't what I asked." "Raven." She started moving before he could press further, ignoring how her leg screamed protest with each step. Raven Blackthorn, formerly of Silverpine territory, now of nowhere. Callan matched her pace easily, his presence both comforting and unsettling. "Silverpine exiled you. That pack's been dying slowly for years under Kieran's leadership. Weak alpha, weaker council. You won't hear me disagree." They walked in tense silence through increasingly familiar-looking forest. Eventually buildings emerged through the trees, a settlement much smaller than Silverpine, maybe 50 structures total. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in clear organization. Training grounds, food stores, a central meeting hall. everything built with strategic purpose. Wolves emerged from doorways and paths drawn by their alpha's return. But Raven immediately noticed something wrong. There were too many elderly, too many children, very few wolves in their prime fighting years. The pack felt depleted. Alpha Callan, an older woman, approached, relief flooding her weathered face. "Thank the moon. We were worried when you didn't return last night." "I'm fine, Mara. This is Raven. She needs medical attention and temporary shelter." Mara's keen eyes took in Raven's condition and exile scent. Understanding and pity flickered across her expression. "Of course. Bring her to the healing house." The healing house smelled of herbs and old pain. Mara worked efficiently, cleaning and bandaging Raven's wounds, while Callan stood watch at the door, arms crossed, his attention divided between Raven and the settlement beyond. "You're wondering why an alpha pack looks like a retirement community," Callan said without looking at her. Raven had learned long ago that honesty served better than pretty lies. "Yes. Plague took most of our prime warriors 3 years ago. Disease that targeted wolves in their peak years left the young and old largely unaffected. We lost nearly 2/3 of our strength." His jaw tightened, "including my father, the previous alpha, and my mate." The last word landed heavy as stone. Raven's wolf stirred with unexpected sympathy. An alpha without a Luna leading a decimated pack. No wonder he looked like he carried the weight of mountains. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "We survive. Barely." He finally met her eyes. "Which brings me to my proposal." "I haven't agreed to any proposal. You will. Because the alternative is going back out there alone and injured. And we both know how that ends." Raven's fingers tightened on the edge of the cot. "What do you want?" Callan moved closer, his presence filling the small space. "I need fighters. Warriors who can help protect this pack while I rebuild our strength. You clearly know how to handle yourself in combat. Stay, train our wolves, help defend our borders. In exchange for protection, shelter, a place to belong until you figure out what comes next." His golden eyes held hers. "I'm not asking you to swear pack bonds. I know exile makes that impossible for now, but you need us as much as we need you." It was practical, logical. Everything her exhausted body and wounded wolf wanted to accept. But Raven had been burned too many times by alphas who demanded submission, disguised as partnership. "What's the catch?" she asked. "Alphas don't offer sanctuary without expectations." A muscle worked in Callan's jaw. When he spoke, his voice carried brutal honesty. "The catch is that I'm barely holding this pack together. We're vulnerable to attacks from stronger territories. Our wolves are undertrained and overwhelmed. I work myself to exhaustion every day, and it's still not enough." He dragged a hand through his hair. "So, yes, I need you. But I'm not offering false promises. This won't be easy. You'll work harder here than you ever did in Silverpine." Raven searched his face for deception and found only exhausted truth. An alpha admitting weakness, showing vulnerability. It was so contrary to everything she'd known that it left her momentarily speechless. "I won't submit," she finally said. "I won't lower my eyes or bite my tongue when I think you're wrong. If that's what you're expecting—" "I'm expecting exactly what I see." Callan's lips curved into something almost like a smile. Her wolf too wild for her own good and too stubborn to know when to quit. That's exactly what Stormcrest needs right now. Against every instinct that screamed warnings, Raven felt something shift in her chest. Not pack bonds, those were still severed and raw, but something else, a fragile thread of possibility. "1 month," she said. "Trial period. If it doesn't work, I walk away. No obligations. No questions." Callan extended his hand. 1 month. But I think you'll stay longer." "Why?" His smile widened slightly, and for the first time, Raven glimpsed the powerful alpha he must have been before tragedy struck. "Because you're tired of running, Raven Blackthorn, and because deep down you know you were meant for more than just survival." She took his hand, his calloused palm warm against hers, and tried to ignore how right it felt. Neither of them noticed the silver pendant at Raven's throat glowing softly in the dim light, reacting to Callan's proximity with ancient magic neither yet understood. The wild girl and the struggling alpha. two broken wolves about to discover they were each other's salvation. The moon had plans for them both. Chapter 2. Awakening. The first week at Stormcrest tested every assumption Raven had ever held about pack hierarchy. Callan wasn't like Kieran. He didn't demand blind obedience or punish questions. Instead, he listened. When Raven suggested modifications to their patrol routes, he implemented them immediately. When she challenged his decision to restrict combat training to males only, he invited her to demonstrate why he was wrong. She'd expected resentment from the pack. Instead, she found wolves desperate for competent leadership. Mara, the elderly healer, treated her like a long-lost daughter. Young wolves sought her guidance during training. Even the suspicious Beta, a grizzled warrior named Thomas who'd survived the plague by pure stubbornness, eventually nodded approval at her fighting techniques. But it was Callan who unsettled her most. He worked from dawn until long past midnight, overseeing patrols, settling disputes, hunting for the pack, training warriors, maintaining their defenses. Raven watched him push himself past exhaustion daily, his powerful frame growing leaner as he prioritized feeding others before himself. "You're going to collapse," she told him bluntly one evening, finding him alone in the training yard long after others had retired. Moonlight painted his sweat-slicked skin silver as he practiced combat forms with relentless precision. "I'll rest when the pack is secure." He didn't stop moving, each strike and block flowing with deadly grace. "You'll rest when you're dead at this rate. Then what happens to them?" That made him pause. He turned to face her, breathing hard, golden eyes reflecting starlight. "What would you have me do? We're undermanned and vulnerable. I can't afford weakness." "Taking care of yourself isn't weakness." Raven moved closer, recognizing the self-destructive pattern because she'd lived it herself. "It's strategic. A sick alpha serves no one." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." She was. Years of fighting to prove herself, refusing to show vulnerability, pushing past every limit until she broke. The exile had been inevitable. She'd been destroying herself slowly, and Silverpine had simply finished what she'd started. "I know what it looks like when someone's running from grief instead of dealing with it," she said quietly. Callan's expression hardened. "Careful, Raven." "Or what? You'll exile me." "I've already survived that once." She held his gaze, refusing to back down. "Your mate died 3 years ago. Your father died. Your pack was decimated. And instead of processing any of it, you're working yourself to death to avoid feeling it." The growl that rumbled from his chest carried alpha warning. "You know nothing about what I've lost. You're right, but I know what it's like to carry weight that wasn't meant to be borne alone." She stepped closer, close enough to smell pine and leather and exhaustion on his skin. "You told me Stormcrest needed me. Maybe you need someone who's not afraid to tell you when you're being an idiot." For a long moment, tension crackled between them, volatile and electric. Then, impossibly, Callan laughed. The sound came rough and surprised, as if he'd forgotten how. "You really are too wild for your own good," he said, but his tone had softened. "So I've been told." Raven offered a slight smile. "Now go to bed before you fall over. I'll finish the patrol check. That's not your responsibility. Neither is running yourself into the ground, yet here we are." Something shifted in Callan's expression, a crack in the armor he'd maintained since they met. Vulnerability flickered across his face before he controlled it. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Not many wolves dare challenge me anymore." "Then they're not serving you very well." He moved past her toward the pack house but paused at the door. "Raven, your month trial ends in 3 weeks, but I hope you'll consider staying permanently. Stormcrest is stronger with you in it." Before she could respond, he disappeared inside, leaving her alone beneath the stars with her heart beating strangely fast. The dynamic between them evolved after that night. Callan began asking her opinion on pack decisions. She accompanied him on border patrols, their wolves running side by side through moonlit forests with an ease that surprised them both. During council meetings, she provided the dissenting voice he needed, challenging assumptions and forcing better solutions. The pack noticed. Thomas pulled her aside one afternoon, his scarred face serious. "The Alpha trusts you. That's not something he gives easily anymore." "I haven't done anything to earn it." You exist, you're competent, and you're not trying to manipulate him for power or position. Thomas's expression softened slightly. His mate, Luna Sarah, she was good for him, kept him grounded. Since she died, he's been... The old beta searched for words, lost, until you arrived. Raven's wolf stirred uncomfortably. I'm not his mate, Thomas. I'm just helping temporarily. Maybe. But the pack sees what you two don't yet. He walked away before she could demand explanation. That night, strange dreams plagued her sleep. She stood in an ancient throne room, silver moonlight streaming through crystalline windows. A crown of starlight rested on her head. Beside her, a wolf with storm-grey fur and burning gold eyes stood as her equal. Power thrummed between them, not dominance but perfect balance. A voice whispered through the dream, ancient and feminine, born to rule beside him, born to complete what was broken. Raven woke gasping, her silver pendant burning hot against her chest. When she touched it, images flashed through her mind, her mother pressing it into her hands as a baby, tears streaming down her face. Keep this hidden, her mother had whispered, until you're strong enough to understand. Understand what? Morning brought new complications. A messenger arrived from the Ironwood territory, a powerful pack from the eastern mountains. Their alpha, Marcus Ironwood, requested a meeting with Callan to discuss mutual defense agreements. The words were diplomatic. The underlying threat was clear. Ironwood wanted Stormcrest's land. They were testing whether Callan was strong enough to defend it. We accept, Callan told the messenger. 3 days from now, neutral ground at Silver Creek. After the messenger departed, chaos erupted in the council room. We can't show weakness, Thomas insisted, but we also can't afford a fight with Ironwood. They outnumber us 3-1. Maybe we negotiate, suggested Mara. Offer them hunting rights in exchange for protection. That's submission, another council member argued. It'll make us targets for every hungry pack in the region. Voices rose, arguments overlapping. Callan sat silent at the head of the table, the weight of impossible choices visible in his clenched jaw. Raven had stayed quiet through most council meetings, still conscious of her outsider status. But watching Callan struggle alone while his council panicked sparked something fierce in her chest. Show strength, she said, voice cutting through the noise. Everyone turned to stare, Callan's golden eyes locked onto hers. Ironwood expects you to grovel or fight, Raven continued. Do neither. Meet them with confidence. Bring your strongest warriors, me included. Make them see that Stormcrest is recovering, not desperate. Let them wonder what resources you're hiding. That's a bluff, Thomas said. What happens when they call it? They won't. Because Alpha Callan will make it clear that any attack on Stormcrest will cost them more than they're willing to pay. Raven held Callan's gaze. You don't survive by bowing or blustering. You survive by being unpredictable enough that enemies hesitate. Callan's lips curved into a predatory smile, the first genuine expression of alpha confidence Raven had seen from him. She's right. We show strength. Thomas, select our best warriors. Raven, you'll stand at my right during negotiations. That's traditionally the Luna's position, Mara said carefully. I'm aware. Callan's tone brooked no argument. Raven has earned the right to represent Stormcrest's strength. The declaration sent ripples through the council, but no one protested. As the meeting dispersed, Callan caught Raven's arm. That position carries implications, he said quietly. You understand that? She understood perfectly. Standing at an alpha's right implied partnership, equality. In traditional pack hierarchy, only a Luna claimed that space. By placing her there, Callan was making a statement that would resonate through every pack that heard about it. Are you sure you want those implications? She asked. His hand tightened slightly on her arm, his expression intense. I've never been more sure of anything. You've brought strength back to this pack, to me. Whatever happens at Silver Creek, I want Ironwood to see exactly what Stormcrest has become. Heat flooded Raven's chest, not just from his words, but from the way he looked at her. Like she mattered, like she was essential rather than tolerated. Then I'll stand beside you, she said, and we'll make them regret testing Stormcrest. The 3 days passed in intense preparation. Raven trained with the selected warriors, honing their formation tactics and combat responses. Callan worked with Thomas on negotiation strategies. At night, when the pack house finally quieted, Raven often found Callan still awake, studying maps and reports by firelight. She started bringing him food he'd otherwise skip. He started walking her back to her cabin after strategy sessions, their conversations ranging from pack politics to personal stories neither had shared with others. The air between them grew charged with something neither dared name, but both felt intensely. The night before the meeting, Raven couldn't sleep. She found Callan on the training yard fence staring at the moon with shadows heavy across his features. "Worried?" she asked, joining him. "Always." He didn't look at her. 3 years ago I had a Luna who balanced my decisions, a father who'd survived 50 years of pack leadership, warriors I'd trained beside since childhood. Now I'm leading with ghosts and trying to convince stronger packs we're not easy prey. You're doing better than you know. Am I? He finally turned to her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. I lost my mate, Raven. I felt our bond shatter the night she died. That kind of pain doesn't heal. But lately, he hesitated, seeming to search for words. Lately, when you're near, the emptiness feels less consuming. You make me remember who I was before grief became my only constant. Raven's wolf stirred powerfully, recognizing something profound in his confession. Her pendant grew warm again, pulsing against her chest like a second heartbeat. Callan, I know. You're not bound to this pack. You're not my mate. I'm not asking for anything beyond what you've already given. His hand lifted, hesitating near her face before he let it drop. But I need you to know, having you here, having your strength and your defiance and your absolutely infuriating honesty, it's saved me in ways I can't fully express. Something cracked open inside Raven's chest. All her life, she'd been too much, too wild, too difficult, too inconvenient. But Callan looked at her like she was exactly enough, like the fire that had gotten her exiled was the same fire he desperately needed. Tomorrow, she said, voice rough with emotion, tomorrow we show Ironwood what happens when they underestimate Stormcrest, and after that, we'll figure out the rest. He smiled, genuine and warm and devastating. Together? Together. They stood in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching while the moon traced silver paths across the sky. Neither noticed how Raven's pendant glowed brighter. Reacting to their proximity, neither understood that ancient magic was stirring, recognizing two wolves who'd been marked by destiny long before they were born. But the moon knew. She'd waited centuries for this pair to find each other. And tomorrow, at Silver Creek, the first threads of their true destiny would begin to unravel. Chapter 3. Recognition. Silver Creek lived up to its name, a crystalline waterway cutting through neutral territory between Stormcrest and Ironwood lands. By unspoken tradition, this space belonged to neither pack, making it ideal for negotiations that could turn violent. Ancient stone markers ringed the clearing, carved with symbols that predated modern packs, remnants of wolves who'd understood something about pack bonds that had been lost to time. Callan arrived with his delegation precisely at midday. Thomas and 5 of their strongest warriors flanked him, armor polished to reflect sunlight, weapons visible but not drawn. Raven walked at his right side, wearing leather combat gear that balanced mobility with protection, her dark hair braided back to expose her sharp features and defiant eyes. Ironwood was already waiting. Alpha Marcus stood a head taller than Callan, his auburn hair streaked with silver, his frame built like an avalanche made flesh. 20 warriors surrounded him, all in their prime, all radiating the confidence of a pack that hadn't known true hardship in generations. His beta, a woman with cold eyes and colder smile, assessed Stormcrest's delegation like a predator counting rabbits. "Callan Stormcrest," Marcus's voice boomed across the clearing. "You look tired. Leadership wearing on you?" The insult was deliberate and public. Callan's jaw tightened, but his expression remained neutral. "Marcus Ironwood, your concern is touching, I assure you. Stormcrest remains quite capable." "Does it?" Marcus's gaze swept over their small group. lingering pointedly on their limited numbers. I hear your borders have been tested lately. Rogues growing bold. That sort of thing happens when packs show weakness. Which is why we're grateful for your interest in, what was it, mutual defense agreements. Callan's tone carried subtle mockery, unless you meant something else entirely. Tension crackled through the air. The warriors on both sides shifted, hands moving closer to weapons. Marcus's smile sharpened like a blade. Let's speak plainly. Your pack is dying. 3 years since the plague, and you've barely recovered a fraction of your strength. Meanwhile, Ironwood thrives. We have warriors to spare, resources to share. We could protect your territory far better than you currently manage alone. In exchange for submission, Stormcrest becomes a satellite pack under Ironwood authority. You maintain your alpha title, but ultimately answer to me. Your wolves get protection. Your land gets proper management. Everyone benefits. The proposal was dressed in diplomatic language, but the reality was clear. Marcus wanted to absorb Stormcrest entirely, reducing Callan to a figurehead alpha with no real power. It was the wolf equivalent of conquest without bloodshed. Raven felt rage building in her chest. She'd watched Callan sacrifice everything for his pack, work himself past exhaustion, lead with integrity despite impossible odds. And this arrogant bastard wanted to claim it all with pretty words and veiled threats. Callan's hand moved subtly, touching her wrist in silent warning. Don't. Not yet. Your generosity is noted, Callan said with dangerous calm. However, Stormcrest has survived far worse than a temporary reduction in numbers. We decline your offer. Marcus's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. Pride won't protect your wolves when hostile packs decide your territory is ripe for claiming. Perhaps, but neither will submission to alphas who view partnership as ownership. Callan stepped forward, his presence suddenly expanding to fill the clearing with alpha authority that made even Ironwood warriors straighten. Stormcrest stands independent. We always have, we always will. Big words from a small pack. Marcus moved closer, using his superior size to intimidate. Tell me, Callan, what exactly makes you think you can refuse? Your warriors, your resources, your token female fighter. His dismissive gesture toward Raven ignited something violent in Callan's eyes. But before he could respond, Raven spoke, her voice carrying clear and sharp across the clearing. This token female has survived things that would break most of your pampered warriors. I've been exiled, hunted by rogues, and rebuilt myself from nothing. So perhaps instead of measuring strength by numbers, you should consider measuring it by resilience. She met Marcus's stare without flinching. Stormcrest might be smaller, but we're forged from harder material than Ironwood will ever understand. Shocked silence fell. An unmated female, an exiled wolf without pack status, had just publicly challenged an alpha. It violated every protocol, broke every rule of hierarchy and tradition. Marcus's face flushed with fury. You dare— She dares because I allow it, Callan interrupted, his voice dropping to a growl that resonated with raw alpha power. Raven speaks for Stormcrest as my chosen partner. Her words carry my authority. Question her again, and you question me directly. The declaration rippled through both groups like lightning. Chosen partner. Not Luna, not yet, but the intent was unmistakable. Callan had just publicly claimed Raven as his equal, in front of witnesses from multiple packs. The implications would spread through pack networks like wildfire. Marcus's beta whispered urgently in his ear, clearly advising retreat from this escalating confrontation. But Marcus's pride wouldn't allow it. Your chosen partner, he said with acidic emphasis, is exile trash from a failing pack. That's the quality of wolf you rely on. That's Stormcrest's great strength. The insult hit harder than Marcus knew. Raven had spent years being called trash, being told she was too wild, too difficult, too much. Hearing it again, in front of Callan and his warriors, threatened to drag her back to that place of shame and isolation. But then Callan's hand found hers. His fingers laced through hers, squeezing gently. When she looked at him, his golden eyes burned with something fierce and protective. That exiled trash, Callan said quietly, has more honor, courage, and strength than wolves who inherited power without earning it. She survived trials that would destroy lesser wolves and emerged sharper for it. So yes, Marcus. That's exactly the quality Stormcrest relies on, and it's more than sufficient. Something shifted in Raven's chest, a sensation like chains breaking. All her life she'd fought alone, defended herself alone, stood against judgment and rejection alone. But Callan's defense of her, his public validation of her worth, unlocked emotions she'd buried deep beneath protective anger. Her pendant blazed hot suddenly, flaring with light visible even in bright daylight. Both alphas froze, staring at the silver symbol now glowing against her chest. "That's impossible," Marcus breathed, recognition dawning in his expression. Thomas stepped forward, shock written across his scarred face. "The royal seal. That's the mark of the lunar bloodline." Everything seemed to slow. Raven looked down at the pendant she'd worn since childhood, seeing clearly for the first time the intricate symbol that had always been present but never truly visible. A crown wreathed in moon phases, surrounded by stars arranged in patterns that matched the ancient markers ringing Silver Creek. "What bloodline?" she demanded. "What are you talking about?" Mara pushed through the crowd, her elderly face pale with awe. "The lunar bloodline, the original royal line of wolves before the great packs fractured and scattered. They were said to carry the moon's direct blessing, capable of extraordinary power and destined to rule with perfect balance." She touched Raven's pendant with trembling fingers. "This symbol hasn't been seen in over 2 centuries. Everyone assumed the bloodline died out." "It didn't die," Thomas said slowly, pieces clicking together. "It went into hiding. During the purges, when power-hungry alphas hunted down the royal families to eliminate threats to their territories. Some must have survived by concealing their heritage, passing down the pendants but losing the knowledge of what they truly meant." Raven's mind reeled, her mother's tears, the whispered warnings to keep it hidden, the way her father had always seemed slightly afraid of her, as if she might become something he couldn't control. "I'm nobody," she said, voice cracking, "just an exile from a mediocre pack." "You were never just anything," Callan said, still holding her hand. His expression showed shock, but also something else, recognition. "I felt it the moment we met. Power in you that didn't match your circumstances, authority you carried naturally despite having no pack status. I thought it was just personality, but it was bloodline." Marcus had gone very still, calculating rapidly. A wolf of royal bloodline standing beside a struggling alpha changed everything. If Raven's heritage became widely known, if she formally bonded with Callan, they could claim legitimacy that superseded normal pack hierarchies. Stormcrest wouldn't just be another small pack, it would be the foundation for potentially re-establishing the ancient bloodline's authority. "This changes nothing," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Royal blood or not, you're still exiled, still unbonded. A symbol without power is just jewelry." "Perhaps," Callan said, "but that's no longer your concern. I believe our negotiations are concluded. Stormcrest will remain independent. We'll defend our borders as necessary. And if Ironwood wishes to test that resolve, we'll remind you why the lunar bloodline was feared and respected for a reason." He turned, still holding Raven's hand, and walked away from Silver Creek without waiting for dismissal. His warriors followed immediately, forming protective ranks around Raven. The message was clear: Stormcrest stood united, and any threat to their chosen royal would be met with absolute force. They were halfway back to their territory before the shock wore off enough for speech. "I don't understand," Raven said, voice small in a way it hadn't been since childhood. "If I'm supposedly royal bloodline, why was I stuck in Silverpine? Why didn't anyone know?" "Protection," Mara said gently. "Your parents must have hidden you deliberately. After the purges, royal wolves who survived did so by becoming invisible. By the time you were born, the knowledge of what the bloodline meant had probably faded. They knew to hide the pendant, but not why it truly mattered. Until you put it on near an alpha of compatible power," Thomas added, looking at Callan with new understanding. "The seal recognizes worthiness. It only reveals itself in the presence of a wolf strong enough to stand beside royal blood as an equal." Callan's hand tightened on Raven's. "Is that why—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. Why what? Raven demanded. Why it feels right. Why you fit into Stormcrest like you'd always belonged. Why my wolf recognizes you as... He stopped again, jaw tightening. As what, Callan? He pulled her aside from the group, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I lost my mate 3 years ago. I felt that bond shatter, and I never thought I'd feel anything like it again. But with you... His golden eyes searched hers desperately. With you, something else is building. Different from what I had before, but equally powerful. My wolf claims you already. Has since the moment I found you fighting those rogues. I thought it was just attraction, maybe pack instinct to protect a strong female. But if your royal bloodline, if the pendant recognized me as worthy to stand beside you... You think we're fated, mates? Raven finished, the words barely a whisper. I think the moon has plans for us that we're only beginning to understand. And I think Marcus Ironwood just became the least of our problems. Raven's pendant pulsed warmly against her chest, as if agreeing. They reached Stormcrest territory, as sunset painted the sky crimson. The entire pack had gathered, news of the revelation having somehow reached them already. They stared at Raven with mixture of awe and hope, seeing not just the wild exile who'd helped train their warriors, but a symbol of something greater. What do I do? Raven asked Callan quietly. I don't know how to be royal. I don't know what this bloodline means or what power it supposedly carries. Callan faced her, taking both her hands in his. You do exactly what you've always done. You fight, you lead. You refuse to bow to anyone who demands your submission without earning your respect. The bloodline doesn't change who you are, Raven. It just explains why you've always been extraordinary. Something in his voice, in the way he looked at her like she hung the moon itself, broke through the last of her defenses. She'd spent so long believing she was too much, too wild, too difficult. But Callan saw her fire and called it strength, saw her defiance and called it courage, saw her scars and called her beautiful. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. That means you understand the weight of what's ahead. He smiled slightly. But you won't face it alone. Whatever comes, whether it's Ironwood, other packs, or the entire weight of ancient prophecy, we face it together. Together, she echoed. The pack erupted in howls of approval, their voices rising to meet the emerging moon. In that moment, standing beside Callan with her pendant glowing and her wolf singing with purpose, Raven understood. She hadn't been too wild for Silverpine. She'd been too royal, too powerful, too destined for something far greater than they could comprehend. And the struggling alpha who'd found her bleeding in the forest hadn't just saved her life. He'd found his equal, his partner, perhaps even his true mate. The moon smiled down on them both, ancient and knowing. The real journey was just beginning. Chapter 4. Ascension news of the royal bloodline's re-emergence spread through pack networks like storm winds. Within days, messengers arrived from territories across the region, some offering alliance, others demanding proof, still others barely concealing threats. The ancient bloodline had been mythical for so long that its sudden appearance threw centuries of established hierarchy into question. Callan's council room became a war room. Maps covered every surface, markers showing pack territories, alliance networks, and potential threats. Thomas coordinated increased border patrols. Mara researched every scrap of history about the lunar bloodline's powers and traditions, and Raven found herself at the center of attention she'd never wanted and didn't know how to handle. The Crescent Valley Pack requests an audience, Thomas reported during morning briefings. They want to verify the legitimacy of the royal claim. Translation. They want to see if we're strong enough to back up our position, Raven said. She'd learned to read diplomatic language quickly. What do you recommend? The fact that Callan consistently asked her opinion, treating her as co-leader despite her lack of formal lunar status, had become pack standard. The wolves no longer questioned it. If anything, they seemed relieved their alpha finally had a partner sharing the impossible burden. We meet them, Callan decided, but here, on our territory. They come to us, or not at all. More messengers brought more requests, more challenges, more opportunities and threats tangled together. Through it all, Raven felt power growing inside her, not pack bonds, but something older and deeper. Her instincts sharpened. her strength increased. When she fought during training, she moved with grace and precision that surprised even herself. The pendant taught her somehow. In dreams, she saw fragments of the past, royal wolves wielding power that bent moonlight itself, commanding respect not through dominance but through perfect balance of strength and wisdom. She woke remembering techniques no one had taught her, understanding pack politics with insights beyond her experience. "You're changing," Callan observed one night. They'd fallen into the habit of late evening walks, discussing strategy, and slowly revealing pieces of themselves they'd hidden from everyone else. "Growing into your heritage." "Does it frighten you?" Raven asked. "That I might become more powerful than you?" He stopped walking, turning to face her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It should, according to every instinct bred into male alphas for generations. We're supposed to be the strongest, the most dominant, the ultimate authority." His hand lifted, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. "But when I look at you growing stronger, all I feel is pride and relief. Because I'm tired of carrying everything alone, Raven. I need you powerful, need you equal, need you beside me as true partner, not subordinate decoration." "Callan!" Her wolf stirred powerfully, responding to something in his voice, his touch, his absolute sincerity. "I know we haven't known each other long. I know you're still processing what the bloodline means, but I need to say this before circumstances force decisions we're not ready for." He took a breath. "When I lost Sarah, I thought I'd lost my capacity to bond. But what I'm feeling for you isn't just attraction or strategic alliance. My wolf claims you completely. And my human side isn't far behind. You make me stronger, Raven. You balance my weaknesses with your strengths. You challenge me to be better. And I—" The howl that shattered the night cut off his words. Both of them shifted to combat readiness instantly, recognizing the alarm in that sound, Thomas's voice. They ran toward the border, arriving to find their patrol surrounded, but not by enemies, by hundreds of wolves. Pack after pack had arrived at Stormcrest borders, their alphas stepping forward with varying degrees of respect and calculation. Crescent Valley, Northern Ridge, Eastwood, Shadowfen. At least 8 territories represented, their combined forces dwarfing Stormcrest's numbers tenfold. "This is unprecedented," Thomas murmured, tension vibrating through his frame. Callan moved forward to meet them, Raven at his side. His alpha authority filled the space, but even that seemed inadequate against so many gathered leaders. "Alphas," Callan greeted them formally. "Your arrival is unexpected. To what do we owe this gathering?" Alpha Crescent, a middle-aged female with silver-streaked black hair, stepped forward as apparent spokesperson. Word of the royal bloodline's discovery reached every pack within 500 miles. Some dismissed it as rumor, others recognized the opportunity. But all of us remember the old stories. The lunar bloodline didn't just rule, it unified, brought peace to fractured packs, established laws that protected all wolves rather than just the powerful. "And you want proof she's legitimate?" Callan said, understanding immediately. "We want to see if the legends are true, if royal blood still carries the old power." Crescent's eyes locked onto Raven with uncomfortable intensity. "The stories say true royals could command moonlight itself, could speak with the moon's authority, could recognize worthy wolves and forge bonds that transcended normal pack hierarchy." Raven felt every eye upon her, felt the weight of expectations she didn't understand how to meet. "I don't know what power I'm supposed to have. I only discovered my heritage days ago." "Then let the moon decide," another alpha said. "The traditional test. If you're truly royal, the moon will answer your call." "What test?" Callan demanded, moving protectively closer to Raven. Crescent gestured toward Silver Creek, barely visible through the trees. "The ceremony hasn't been performed in over 200 years, but every alpha knows the stories. Royal blood stands at the ancient markers, calls upon the moon's blessing, and if deemed worthy, the moon responds visibly. Moonlight becomes tangible. The royal seal glows bright enough to be seen for miles, and any wolf present feels the truth of the bloodline's authority." "And if she's not royal?" Callan asked dangerously. "If this is elaborate theater designed to humiliate her, then we'll know the bloodline truly died, and pack hierarchy continues as established." Crescent's expression softened slightly. We're not here as enemies, Alpha Callan. We're here seeking what all wolves want: stability, purpose, a return to the unity our grandparents' knew. If Raven is truly royal, if she can truly command the moon's blessing, then we would consider pledging loyalty to the reformed lunar court. The implications hit like avalanche, not just recognition of her bloodline, but potential allegiance from multiple packs. The beginning of something that could reshape wolf politics across the entire region. It's her choice, Callan said, turning to Raven. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But Raven felt the stirring of something deep inside, ancient knowledge waking, royal blood recognizing duty. She'd spent her life fighting. Maybe it was time to fight for something larger than just survival. I'll do it, she said. If the moon deems me worthy, we'll know. If not. She met Crescent's eyes steadily. Then at least we'll have truth. They gathered at Silver Creek, hundreds of wolves forming rings around the ancient stone markers. Raven stood at the center, her pendant warm against her chest, moonlight filtering through clouds overhead. Callan wanted to stand beside her, but tradition demanded she face this trial alone. Mara had coached her through what little was remembered. Speak from your heart. The moon doesn't respond to formula or ritual. She responds to truth. Show her who you are. Show her your strength, your scars, your purpose. Raven closed her eyes, feeling inadequate and terrified and determined all at once. She didn't know prayers or ancient words. She only knew her own story. I don't know if I'm worthy of royal blood, she said aloud, her voice carrying across the silent gathering. I was exiled, called too wild, told I'd never belong anywhere. I've been broken and rebuilt more times than I can count. I've survived on stubbornness and rage and refusal to bow to wolves who demanded submission without earning respect. The pendant grew warmer,